Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Marriage and Motherhood podcast. This is your host, Michelle Perda, life and marriage coach for moms. And this week we're going to be talking about how to stop nagging your husband. so many women nag at their husbands, right? They ask them to do something, they don't do it, or they don't do it when they want to do it, or they don't do it well enough. And women just go off and nag about why they don't get enough support, why they can't, do it when they want them to, why do they like sit around, all the stereotypical things that you see on TV. And this episode is about how you can stop and also why you're doing it. It's important to know why you're doing something so that you can start to work through that and choose intentionally what you would rather do instead if it isn't something that you want to continue doing, right? So why do women nag? I don't really know why it started, but I know why our generation does it. We saw our moms do it. And because we kept seeing our moms nag at our dads or whoever, like in my case, my dad and my stepdad, we learned that this is what we need to do to get them to do what we want them to. So like we ask nicely first, and if it doesn't work out, then nagging them is the only way we can get them to do the thing that we want them to do. But the thing about that is when we do that, we're treating them like kids, right? And they're actually fully functional human beings. But there's this thing going around where, we joke about, oh, haha, yeah, I have 4 kids. 3 of them are ones that I gave birth to, and the other one is my husband, right? So much to unpack there. That's me another episode. But that's a common thing that I hear people say. Women have told me, yeah, I say that. I think that about my husband. I think of him as another one of my kids. And here's the thing. Nagging is not effective. It's not effective, right? We don't enjoy nagging. Our husbands don't enjoy hearing nagging. So why the hell do we still do it? Okay, so let's pack that. So let's unpack that. We nag because we want something from them, right? We want help, we want support, whatever it is. We want them to ask us on a date. We want their support around the house on a house project. We want their support with kids, whatever it is, right? And when they don't meet our expectations, whether it's getting it done when we want them to or doing it to the quality or standard that we have, then we get disappointed and we get upset, right? And when that happens, our minds start making assumptions that are not supportive of the marriage. It starts assuming that we're not important to them, that we're not a priority, that they don't love us enough to fulfill our request. And so we're tying our worth, our lovableness to the thing that we're asking them to do, right? And so we start to feel a sense of urgency when the request isn't fulfilled in the way that we want it fulfilled. And so we feel like in order to restore that confidence that we are loved, that our marriage is healthy, we feel the need to mimic what we saw our parents do. Okay. So what did our moms do? She nagged. She nitpicked. She nagged at the dad until he did the thing. But if you were to step outside of your situation and view it as a third person, you would see nothing good about that situation. Like, sure, at the end of the day, your husband may end up doing what you want him to do, but is it the right motivation? He's doing it to essentially shut you up. He's doing it because he's sick of hearing you nag. versus doing it because he genuinely wants to. Do you see the difference there? Right? Nagging creates an unhealthy dynamic in your relationship. It perpetuates the mother-child relationship rather than a partner-to-partner relationship. Like, hey, I need some help. Can you do this? Right? And that goes both ways. He sometimes needs your help too. Would you like it if he nagged you incessantly until you went into the thing? Okay. So we're out there looking for that confirmation that he does love us, that he does care about us, and that they do want to support us. But in that time when you're nagging, it's really uncomfortable, right? Our feelings are filled with doubt and insecurity. And instead of being vulnerable about it, it's coming out as frustration and anger, which again, learned from our parents, right? I don't know about you, but emotional intelligence was not something that I grew up learning. I had to go out and learn it myself through my own relationships, not thriving, and then finally realizing, okay, I've got some work to do on myself to experience relationships how I want to, right? Not looking at other people wondering, why are they so happy and why do I feel so empty in a relationship, even though the people I was dating were all great guys? Why was I always nagging? Why was I always arguing with them? Why was I always unhappy? Okay. So, question for yourself, like, do you want to have your husband do things because he feels forced or because he genuinely wants to, right? A lot of this comes from us feeling like we need to control situations, like, oh, he's not doing it, so I need to keep talking at him, not even to him, but at him, in order for that thing to get done. Okay, to show that he loves me. But we all show our love in different ways, which you can listen in on in my past episode about the 5 love languages, right? Like, just because he's not ready to support you in the time that you need, in the exact way that you want, doesn't mean that he doesn't love you, doesn't mean that he doesn't care about you. There could be, and probably are, other variables at play. And so when we force ourselves to limit the definition in which he can show his love in such a restrained, confined way, no one's going to win. You're going to perpetually be disappointed. He's going to feel like nothing he does is good enough. And both of you are just going to not have the connection that you want, not have fun like you want to, not feel like you have true partners like you really deserve to feel. Okay. So if you find yourself nagging at your husband a lot, I want you to stop to consider why he's not doing what you need him to when you want him to. Why do you think he's doing that? Right? Like, I want you to stop and actually think about that beyond what your mind is trying to feed you, which is like, oh, he doesn't love you, he doesn't care about you, you're not a priority. There he goes, just putting himself first. Like, let's just put that on the shelf, put those thoughts on a shelf, and really stop and consider about, like, okay, well, if I assume that he does love me, then why? Like, what could be some reasons why he's not doing it? Or what could be the reason why he's not meeting my expectations? Okay. Now, a reminder here, or maybe you've never thought of this. It's not in his best interest to disappoint or frustrate you, right? So if that's a truth in your marriage, then he doesn't have a reason to do that on purpose, right? So, which means he probably has a sound reason why he's not fulfilling your request in the way that you want him to. Okay, so here are some potential reasons why. Perhaps he has a different priority that he's working on. Perhaps he's resting after a long day, right? Maybe he's working on something else at the moment, right? He has his own life, just like you do. He has his own priorities, just like you do. And sometimes our priorities don't line up. Let's say you're preparing for a party and you need support with preparing for it fully. Maybe you want him to vacuum, right? And so you ask him to vacuum. And he's like, okay, yeah, I'll vacuum. Do you see how that could lead to a very disappointing outcome? You're asking for something, but you're lacking clarity in your request. He could have all the intentions of vacuuming for you. He could have all the intentions of working on a project for you. But without clarity behind your request, it could be something that's lower on his list of priorities. He could be thinking, yeah, I'd love to do that for you. And in his mind, he's like, I have this to do, and I have this to do, and I have that to do. And once I finish those, that's when I'll get to your thing. And meanwhile, you're like, oh, he said yes, he's going to do it right now. Right. And then when you don't see him doing it, you're like, what the hell? What's he doing? He said yes. Why did he tell me he was going to do it if he wasn't going to do it? So on and so forth. Right. And when we do that, we're not factoring in, oh, he has his own priorities that he's considering. He has things that are important to him that maybe I don't value the same. It's not that he's purposely choosing to be lazy, purposely choosing to disappoint you or frustrate you. It's that he's doing what he feels is best. And sometimes that doesn't match up with what we think is best. Doesn't make it wrong, right? It just makes it different. And this is what causes that miscommunication and that disappointment that you feel because it's not meeting your expectation. This like vision of what you've gathered in your head that you think that he's going to fulfill, only to be left with like, it didn't work out that way. What's going on? Okay. So perhaps he doesn't know that you have a timeline in mind. Maybe you were a bit too vague with your request. Maybe you were thinking by the end of the day, but you didn't say so. And he thinks that he has whenever he has time to do it. I once had a client who said, I asked my husband to plan a date and he said yes. And then he never did. And I let weeks go by and he still hasn't. And I'm just so fed up. And I asked her, how did you make that request? And she's like, I just said, like, hey, can you plan our next date? He's like, yeah. I'm like, there's the miscommunication. You're thinking, I want to go on a date next week. He's thinking, yeah, when I have time, I will. But he's busy, right? And who are we to define what is valid to put over or prioritize over doing this, right? But when we are specific about a request, like, hey, I'd really love to go on a date next week. Can you plan it? Then you're putting out that expectation like, oh, she wants to go on a date next week. So if I'm going to plan it, I need to start before that day. Yeah. Okay. Otherwise, he's like, yeah, we got to line up childcare and like, we got to make sure that we have time and, let's look at the calendar. And, sometimes when things get a little overwhelming, we procrastinate, not because we don't want to do it, but we're putting it off because it's overwhelming. And maybe he doesn't have the bandwidth to handle it. And so he's doing things that come easier to him. Okay. So that's just one example of what can happen when there's a miscommunication because there isn't enough detail or clarity or specificity. Whoa, that word, specificity in our request. Okay. So communicating with clarity is important to make sure your request is fully understood so that you don't set yourself up for disappointment. Also, your standards may not be the same as his standards. We all grow up with so different definitions of what it means to be clean or what it means to be a good parent or whatever it is that's coming up for you guys. Okay. It all comes from our upbringing, and how you were raised is different than how he was raised, right? Whatever was emphasized for him may not have been emphasized for you, and vice versa. And then not even going into like the differences of how boys and girls are raised back then. Like, thank goodness we're changing that tone right now and really setting the future generations up for true equal partnership and emotional resilience and intelligence and healthy communication and all that stuff, right? But we cannot go back and make sure that, our husbands are taught what they need to know and that we're taught what we need to know. Okay. So this is not just like a woman versus man kind of thing. It's more like, okay, well, let's see where we're all at. What's our baseline? What did we learn growing up? What do we believe to be true? What are the gaps for what we're trying to create here, right? Like, this is where we're starting from, not necessarily in the same spot, right? On the path, maybe you're starting further behind, maybe he's starting further behind, but you have this common vision for what you want for your relationship. And so understanding where you're each starting from, right? And understanding, okay, well, that's your past. I see why you are the way you are now, right? What's the gap that's gonna get us to having the relationship that we want with each other? And then working off of that, right? Like, some of the things that there's actually a video that clearly showed very common differences between what women notice and what men notice, right? And I mean, besides like the whole, like, how women are so much better at looking for things than men, it's just like boggles my mind when I like experiment with this with my own family. Like, I have my husband, I've got 2 sons, and I've got a daughter, right? And it's just like blows my mind. But men, for whatever reason, have a really hard time looking for things. It's almost like they're a lot better at scanning, whereas women are much better at looking at the finer details. So maybe that's more of like we're not as good of a big picture kind of thing. I don't know, but there's pros and cons to every characteristic or trait that we have, right? So there's no good or bad here. I've just noticed, just an observation, that women are better at looking for things most times. I'm not generalizing here, but like, that's from my experience. Okay. But there was a video, back to that video that I was mentioning, where it showed what men notice, right, when it comes to a kitchen counter, right? And it shows what they see, and it's like a white counter, and it's like, it looks clean, right? It looks clean. So they're like, yeah, it's clean. We don't need to clean it. And then it shows a perspective of a woman, and you get lower down, you get closer up, and you see all these crumbs, right? So I think that was like a really great depiction of how what you notice may not be what he notices. And you cannot assume that what you see is what he sees. Although we all do that. We're like, are you blind? Like, how can you not have noticed that? How could you have not made that decision that I would have? How could you not have done what I would have done? Right. And I think that line of thinking is what gets us in trouble. It's very critical. It's also very condescending, and it doesn't offer any curiosity or compassion towards our partner. Like, what if he wasn't doing it on purpose? What if he genuinely didn't think of it? What if he genuinely just didn't notice? Right. And I feel like I really learned to accept more with my oldest son, who actually has ADHD. So constantly forgetting things on a daily basis, even basic things that he's supposed to do every single day. And, for years, I would get so upset because I'm like, why do I have to keep reminding him? Right? Why do I have to keep reminding him to do this? Why do I have to keep like following up with what he's doing to make sure it's done to the quality and standard that we have set as a family, so that I don't have to go then and like, finish up what he's doing, right? Only one person should touch the job, and that person should do it correctly. That's our rule. And so years of doing that, and then it finally clicked. I'm like, well, I'm not being very accepting, am I? I'm not. So if he has a tendency to forget, what am I doing to help him prepare for the future? Me nagging is only criticizing him and making him feel small and shitty about himself, right? And so if that's not my intention, what can I do instead? So, okay, I know he's forgetful. Let me help him set himself up for success. Let's create some systems in place, right? He is more than willing to finish the job if he like misses a step and decides to go off and do something else because, squirrel brain, right? We can all have that. Sometimes like I go into a different room and I'm like, wait, why did I come in here? Right? It's just that he's experiencing that more often than I am, because I'm not as forgetful. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm definitely forgetful, but because I'm not experiencing the same frequency of forgetfulness as him, it's really easy to not be able to put myself in his position, right? And so I'm judging him for not being like me, and that's not fair, right? No one is like me. Only I'm like me. And so once I was able to like make that connection, then I was like, okay, well, he doesn't have an issue finishing it. So I'm just gonna let him like, hey, can you like come finish this? Right? Are are you gonna have time to do this before this happens? Right. And just be kind. He's not actively being lazy. He's not actively trying to frustrate me. He's not actively trying to put more work on my plate. It just is. And so how can I support him to support the family? Yeah. How can I support him to be a good partner or a great partner in the future? So same thing goes for your husband, right? Understanding, where does he start from? Maybe he was not held accountable for any chores growing up. And so you're going to have to start down more at the basics and getting clear about, hey, this is what I expect out of our partnership. This is what I want to teach to our kids when they watch how we work together. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. Or give some resources so that he can look it up, whatever, right? And work together as a team. You decided to marry him, so let's not forget that. Okay, he's still got a good heart. So how can you work together as a team to leverage your partnership to have your needs met so that you don't feel like you have to nag? And how can you work as a team without making him feel shitty, right? Because when we do that, then they either do things forcibly or they just say, forget it. I'm sick of hearing this. I'm just not going to do anything. Because if I can't do anything that satisfies you, then you might as well do all of it yourself. And that's not exactly what we want either. At the end of the day, your husband wants you to be happy. So next time those critical thoughts creep up, consider what might be happening on his side of things. Okay, bring some compassion and assume the best of him and tone it down, right? Tone it down. Don't just assume that he's doing it on purpose to upset you, because again, right, it serves no purpose for him. Like then he has to deal with you being upset, and then you guys have a talk and da 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 da. He doesn't want to spend time doing that. right? So it's much better for him if you're happy and he wants to help you be happy. And so what you want to do is set him up for success. I don't mean go doing it for him, but just being really, really clear about what it is that you're asking for. Okay. And when you do this, it can prevent disappointment. And all this is accomplished through better communication. All right. So next time you feel like nagging, pause yourself, think about where you might have been able to prevent it and communicate better, right? Talk with him, understand what's going on. He's not doing it on purpose and he loves you and he wants to support you. So communicate better, set your expectations clearly, and of course, get permission, right? Like you don't know what's on his plate. And so make sure that the timing works out. Because if you're like, oh, I need this thing done tomorrow, your emergency doesn't mean it's his emergency. Okay. Of course, it's ideal if he's able to drop whatever he's doing because it's not all that important to help you, but that's not always going to work out. So, again, be mindful of your emergency doesn't mean it's his emergency, and same vice versa. All right. I hope this helps you to stop nagging at your husband because that's creating a dynamic that you really, really don't want to continue. If you want to have a really deep connection and equal partnership with him, you got to stop treating him like a child. All right. Until next time, I will catch you later. Bye.